Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, the author of The Captivating Public Speaker, Peter George.
Do you want to be seen as a thought leader in your field? Would it help if you could continue to grow your network and social media following? Are you striving to get more gigs? If you said yes to any of these, then building a personal brand may be the answer, or at least a significant part of it. In this episode, Victoria Pelletier discusses the importance of personal branding and its impact on professional growth. Victoria is always ready for new challenges, becoming one of the youngest chief operating officers at the age of 24, a president by 35, and a CEO by age 41. She was recognized as one of the top 30 most influential business leaders in tech by CIO Look, 2021's top 50 business leaders in technology by Insight Magazine, and a Mentor of the Year by Women in Communications and Technology in 2020. HSBC Bank awarded her the Diversity and Inclusion and Innovation Award in 2019, and she was IBM's #1 global social seller, ranked by LinkedIn in 2019 and 2020. Here's my conversation with Victoria Pelletier. Hey, Victoria, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter, great to be here.
Victoria, before we get into the importance of personal branding and how my listeners might benefit from it, can you tell us about your own personal brand journey?
Well, it's something that I wouldn't have used the vernacular personal brand probably 20 years ago, but I realized reflecting back on it, I have been focused on my brand for that long. I made a shift from working within a business to consumer environment in banking into business to business. And a way to differentiate myself as the leader of this business and the team was very focused on what I now call personal brand, and have been almost maniacally focused on it for probably the last 10 or 15 years personally, for a host of reasons. And part of that is because of my side hustles, passion projects, but also being in a position to attract people from an employee standpoint to come and work with me.
What type of advantage do you think that's given you?
I think it's given me pretty significant advantage, quite frankly. One, from a business to business perspective, a big part of my brand and who I am as it relates to the clients that I work with is around being, and this isn't an abused term, but trusted partner. It's actually part of my DNA, about being radically candid. My clients understand, that I'm going to not tell them exactly what it is that they want to hear, but that also I'm going to lead a team that delivers for them. And I've been in not just B2B, but leading a lot of outsourcing type environments. So we're oftentimes rebadging some of their own employees, or they're outsourcing, critical components, handling their customers or their own employees. So they want to know that from a leadership perspective, quality and engagement of the team, they're going to be treated well. So it served me exceptionally well from a corporate client standpoint, and then also from an employee standpoint. In fact, the good candidates have done their homework before they come and meet with me. Now, some of them tell me far too much about how much they've researched about me, which can be a bit scary, but generally those who do can come in and be able to ask me questions. They understand already particularly around culture and the kind of leadership that I try and build, what they're going to be walking into. So it serves them well and me. Hopefully it's weeded out a lot of the people that aren't going to be aligned with that from a values perspective.
Well, my audience, which is public speakers, why do you think it's important for them to focus on personal branding?
Well, first of all, there's a million people who want to be public speakers now, and I belong to a number of executive networks. And there's one in particular, I belong to this executive women's network. And I can't tell you how many women I see posting, talking about it, want to do this on the side. And so sometimes I'll spend time coaching them as well. I'm like, well, about what? First of all, let me ask you that. What do you want to speak on? Because there's a million people that want to speak on leadership or diversity and inclusion or what you name it. There's lots of people out there. And a strong personal brand is your unique value proposition and what makes you different from the others. And so you can have an amazing speaker reel, but then also how beyond sort of captivating the audience, what's going to draw that event manager in to want to call you in particular. So showing up much more holistically in a way that's going to build a stronger connection with the audience, not just because of the message you're there, but because, again, who you are much more holistically as a whole person or maybe broader industry experience is incredibly helpful. And that is the way it's not through a speakers bureau that I get the majority of my own speaking engagements. I get it directly through the community, my network, and otherwise word of mouth.
Now, what do you say to people who say, but I can't figure out how I'm different from others or what makes me stand out from the pack?
Well, there's a lot of homework. I actually have these worksheets that I give people when I talk about personal branding and explaining what it is and what it is not. I build sort of these foundations that I ask them to work through around, yes, what is your eminence or your subject matter expertise for which you're known for, but beyond that, what's the legacy you want to have? What is the legacy or impact? What do you want to be known for? What's that? Again, I use that unique value proposition. What makes you different? And so there's work pages. You need to critically go through and put the time and homework in and curate that narrative that's real. I'm not a big fan of fake it till you make it, except when it comes to confidence. But in this case, spend a lot of time curating what that narrative is in terms of the brand you want known, and find your trusted tribe who's going to be critical with you, give you that radical candor and telling you around one, how do they think about you? Brand is born of reputation. So what do they know? What do they say about you? What do others say? And not that you can't pivot or change that, but getting their input on not only what you want it to be, but what their perceived messages are, and then building it. So doing the homework around that. And I don't buy that, someone can't find their differentiated value from others.
Well, we're all different in one way or another.
Exactly.
In your answer, you mentioned what personal branding is not. Could you elaborate on that?
I feel like there's a lot of people that try and create this sort of fictitious is probably, too harsh, Peter, for me to say that, but a bit more of a character. And it is not this character that you play on stage. We show up for our audiences in certain ways, but it is always our whole selves. And so this, I use the word curate, but this false curation of the brand without talking about one's lived experiences or the things that have made people different or unique is important. It's not about I talk to a lot of corporate executives around how to build their brand, how does it differentiate from the corporate brand versus their job title. And there's a fine line that gets walked for those not public speakers, but just those leaders in business. And it's not a place for, I'll say, public opinion. Doesn't that align? I say it's about your values, your interests, your passions, your expertise, but it's not just a place to formulate all of your opinions out there. Now, one could guess, where my political leanings or otherwise might be based upon the values and what I stand for, but those are not actually those opinions and whatnot are not part of the brand. So that's this like walking this fine line often to try and explain that.
Have you heard what noted speakers and readers are saying about Peter's book, The Captivating Public Speaker? You can do no better than investing in Peter George's new book. Chapters are meticulously organized, and every topic is handled with in-depth detail. This book is the ultimate resource. After this episode, please use the link in the show notes to check out The Captivating Public Speaker on Amazon. Now back to Peter and his guest.
Is there anything in particular that trips people up?
How to show their whole selves. They're used to showing up on whatever digital platform. Let's use LinkedIn. They're used to it for one purpose, almost being like their online resume or CV and posting there. And they're like, well, how do I bring that to life? What do I do? What do I say beyond the fact that I've held this role for this many years at this company, and then I progressed, to Y company, et cetera. And so that's the part that I find trips them up, is how to tell that broader story. And for me, it's much like the way I talk about networking. There's a lot of people who have this perspective that there's, one network for personal reasons and one for professional. And for me, it's all just life. And you never know who's connected to whom. And so what trips them up is bringing in those, what they believe are the personal elements of self to showing up online. And so this is where I encourage to, share, what do you stand for? And I use the word legacy a lot because in some it's just my own personal growth and the way I viewed and how much I tied importance to what I did for a day job into who I am as a human. And it very much, even as a parent, I said to my, my children, my goal is just to make sure I raised two really good humans. And so that notion of legacy and what do you want to be known for, on my proverbial tombstone, it's not going to be that I held these titles and I raised this much revenue and profit for these companies. And so if you think about it that way, it's a lot easier to figure out how you're going to show up and what you're going to curate in that narrative around your brand.
How do they get that out to their target audience?
You just said one thing critically, target audience. So you need to identify who is your audience and where is your audience. And they're going to be a multitude of places. And at some point you need to make a decision. You can't necessarily be on every platform. Yes, there's tools and tech to help you with that, whether it's Canva that now publishes directly or Hootsuite or other technology tools that let you go across. I know my audience, for example, is predominantly a corporate audience. You're going to find me on LinkedIn. You're going to find me on Twitter. I'll question mark for me a little bit more on how much I spend time on Twitter, but you're also going to find me on Facebook and on Insta. But I'm not on TikTok, for example. My daughter wants me to get on Snapchat. I'm not there. That the audience that would, either hire me, my services, or in corporate or as a speaker. Not saying they're not playing around there, because I do, but that's not it. So you need to figure out the audience, where they're at, and what, again, messages as well resonate. So the content, even though I'm on LinkedIn, I'm not always speaking about the day job. Again, it connects back to the things that I think are going to build engagement and connection with who I am as an individual in business and as a leader.
Is a publicist necessary for this? Do they help? Is it not necessary?
I don't believe it's necessary for a publicist. I think if someone is struggling with, as you said earlier, maybe the differentiation or developing a more fulsome personal brand, I think you can get a coach to help you with that. And then there's support you can get in terms of your digital content online, which I don't believe is necessarily a publicist. There's lots of people from a social media standpoint that can help you. I'm a big fan of outsourcing, using the likes of Fiverr and Upwork and those kinds of things. The publicist for me is, and I have used one in the past. Some of your audience might hear I'm originally from Canada. And so when I moved back to the US, I needed to build up a stronger presence back in the US because it had been a number of years for me. So getting back on US media was important. So I used a publicist for that helped me build my US reel and gain broader traction since it'd been a period of time. And then I quickly stopped using him and then went back to my own tactics. And by the way, there's a lot of free tools, whether it's, help a reporter out or the free version of Quoted. There's a paid version of that, to some amazing classes that'll teach you how to do it and pitch other reporters as well.
So when they develop this brand, they target their audience and it doesn't resonate. What happens?
Well, that might be the time to pivot. So here's a good time to get some critical feedback and asking people who are leaders in the space for their perspective, what has worked well with them. I go back to that, sort of the foundation of building your personal brand. What do you want to be known for? And if your audience is, speakers, so there's, several keynotes that they're delivering or topics that they're speaking to, who's going to want to hear that and go back to. I mean, I'm not going to encourage doing, necessarily formalized market research, but, should they want to, that's an option, and go back to the drawing board. I know that I've had to pivot over time. I've been speaking for 20 years, but the first 10 was almost exclusively from a pure corporate setting around kind of what I did for a day job and the industries I served in. When I decided to go more broadly, sharing some of my lived experience that talks to a very different audience, I pivoted, and I needed to do things a little bit differently and lean in, quite frankly, into some things that made me uncomfortable.
For my listeners who are going to create a personal brand, is this something that happens overnight? Does it take a while? How much time should they give it to look for some results?
It takes time. I've done some coaching specifically for some people around their personal brand. And I think in their minds, they thought it would equate to direct sales and increase in revenue coming in. And that is not the case. So it's going to take time to build this steady growth and network of people who are going to want to follow you, see how you continue to show up online and certainly in person when you get to that stage, and then want to engage with you. How much time it takes, that's a tricky question for me, Peter, because for example, I've always keep on my browser LinkedIn open as my main platform, for example. And so I'm always there and engaging with my audience and content connected back to the things of who I am and what my brand is. I can't tell you how much time I spend doing that. Although LinkedIn's make it easy. It reminds me when activities are happening and there's anniversaries and things like that. So I tell your audience that it's not going to drastically change their lives and their speaking engagements overnight. It's a slow build, but one that you need to be consistent, relevant to your audience, and it will build over time. I mean, I sit at 100,000 followers across all my platforms now, and it took me many years to get there.
Let's go back to that word consistent. What happens if you're not consistent?
I think a lot of people invest in that upfront, set it and forget it. They think because they built this great profile online that people, will just build it and they shall come. And no, I mean, we all understand now how the algorithms work on these platforms. So as much as you can build an amazing profile on platform, you have to engage. And that means not just publishing your own content, and it can be quotes and visuals. It doesn't have to be blog posts, for example. But so publish some content and then engage with others' content. And that continues to bring you to the top of their feed. But engage in a way that's consistent with your brand, your message, the audience, and people that would be hiring you.
Any other advice for our listeners?
I feel like there's a lot of people who leave it in the hands of others, whether it's in corporate of their employers to recognize the work they do and promote them, or as speakers for those who are fortunate to be represented by speakers bureaus. But at the end of the day, they're representing many. So we are all CEO of Brand You. So I'm the CEO of Victoria Pelletier and my own personal brand, and I'm not going to let anyone else take control of it. And so to the point around, again, consistency in building a plan, much like we do any other parts of our lives. You want to lose, the COVID-15 you put on, you've got a New Year's resolution. We build a plan. We put one foot in step of the other, each day and taking a step. And it's exactly the same with brand.
When you mentioned speakers bureaus, I hear a lot of new speakers say, first thing I want to do is get connected with a speakers bureau. And I think there are two problems with that. One is, if you can't sell yourself, they're not going to try to sell you. And two, to your point, they aren't necessarily representing you, at least not all the time. I always thought if your mom's not running the bureau, they're not looking out for your best interest all the time.
Yeah, agree.
They have too big a corral.
It's absolutely true. And it's sort of like a love-hate relationship I have with executive recruiters. There's this incredibly myopic view. Are you like the exact fit for this? Have you spoken it here or done this role before? And so I agree. You need to speak and advocate for yourself, but get help. And I know that you're a coach in that regards. And so speakers can, be phenomenally engaging with a great message on stage, but actually not know how or where to do the rest. So that's also where it's okay to put your hand up and say, I don't know what I don't know, and I need some help.
I agree wholeheartedly. We can have the best widget, but if you can't market the widget, you're just going to have a whole bunch of great widgets.
That's right.
Victoria, where can my listeners learn more about you and the services you provide?
I have a personal website, which is victoria-pelletier.com. And I won't spell that because I'm assuming it's going to be in your show notes.
It is.
So find me there. It'll take you out to all my other social platforms, which, as I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn, Insta, Facebook, and Twitter.
Victoria, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to tune in again for a conversation with another public speaking expert. And remember to use the link in the show notes to go to Amazon and check out Peter's acclaimed book, The Captivating Public Speaker.